Picture this. A bird stands at the ocean's edge, watching waves roll in under a star-filled sky. Around it, others of its kind paddle through shallow waters, their wings, once built for soaring through clouds, now perfectly shaped for gliding through an entirely different medium. These are not mistakes of nature. They are not evolutionary failures. They are, in fact, some of the most successful birds on Earth. Welcome to Bedtime Biology, where science meets serenity. Each night, we explore the quiet wonders of the natural world, calming your mind and sparking your curiosity. Tonight, we're stepping into a story that spans millions of years and countless islands. A story written into the bones of birds that chose the ground over the sky, the water over the air. We'll travel from the frozen shores of Antarctica to tropical Pacific islands, from the windswept plains of Africa to the ancient forests of New Zealand. Along the way, we'll discover why some of the world's most remarkable birds traded flight for something else entirely, and what that choice reveals about the beautiful, strange logic of evolution. The world has over 60 species of flightless birds alive today. From the towering ostrich sprinting across African savannas to the rotund kakapo waddling through New Zealand undergrowth, from the diving penguins of polar seas to the secretive kiwis probing forest floors in darkness. These birds challenge our very definition of what it means to be a bird. After all, flight seems inseparable from the idea of birds themselves. It's in our language, our metaphors, our dreams. Yet here they are, birds that have lived entire evolutionary histories with their feet firmly on the ground, or their wings cutting through water instead of air. But why? Why would a creature gifted with one of nature's most magnificent abilities, the power of flight, give it up? What could possibly be worth such a profound transformation? And how does a bird that can fly, generation by generation, become a bird that cannot? These questions lead us into one of evolution's most fascinating laboratories. The story of flightless birds isn't just about what they lost. It's about what they gained. It's about islands and isolation, predators and their absence, about trade-offs written in muscle and bone. It's about how life, when given the chance, will always find a way to fill every available niche, even if that means abandoning what once seemed essential. So settle in, let the world outside fade to quiet, and let's explore, together, the remarkable paths that led some birds to abandon the skies and thrive in doing so. To understand why some birds cannot fly, we must first understand what makes flight possible at all. Flight in birds is not a simple matter of having wings. It is an intricate system, a marvel of biological engineering that requires precise coordination of anatomy, metabolism, and behavior. Every flying bird carries within its body a suite of specialized adaptations refined over millions of years. Consider the skeleton of a typical flying bird. The bones are hollow, filled with air sacs that connect to the respiratory system. This pneumatic structure makes the skeleton remarkably light without sacrificing strength. The breastbone or sternum extends downward into a prominent ridge called a keel, providing a massive anchor point for the powerful pectoral muscles that drive the wings. These flight muscles can account for 25 to 35% of a bird's total body weight in strong flyers. The shoulder girdle, composed of the scapula, coracoid, and furcula, forms a strong but flexible framework that can withstand the tremendous forces generated during flight. The wings themselves are aerodynamic marvels. Primary flight feathers, attached to the bones of the hand, act like propellers, generating thrust. Secondary feathers along the forearm create lift. The feathers lock together through an elaborate system of barbs and barbules, forming a continuous, air-resistant surface. Each feather has a central shaft from which parallel barbs emerge, and from each barb extend tiny barbules equipped with hooks that interlock with neighbouring barbules, creating a surface smooth enough to push against the air, but flexible enough to allow slight adjustments during flight. All of this comes at a cost. Flight is energetically expensive. The metabolic demands of sustained flight require a highly efficient respiratory system, a powerful cardiovascular system, and a diet rich in energy. Flying birds must maintain low body weight, which limits how large they can grow. They must invest heavily in wing musculature, which diverts resources from other potential uses. They must devote energy to maintaining and molting their complex plumage. Now picture a bird on an island where there are no foxes, no weasels, no snakes to chase it across the ground. An island where food lies scattered on the forest floor or floats in shallow waters, easily accessible without flight. For this bird, the energetic cost of maintaining flight capability begins to outweigh its benefits. Generation after generation, birds that invest slightly less in flight muscles and slightly more in other traits, stronger legs for running, larger bodies for storing fat reserves, more robust beaks for processing tough foods, find themselves at an advantage. Over time, the changes accumulate. The keel on the breastbone becomes smaller, flatter. The flight muscles shrink. The wings shorten. The bones become heavier, more solid. The elaborate interlocking structure of the feathers simplifies. Barbs separate from each other instead of zipping together into a continuous surface. The bird's center of gravity shifts. Its proportions change. And eventually, after thousands or hundreds of thousands of years, the bird can no longer fly. This is not a sudden loss. It is not a catastrophe. It is a gradual reallocation of resources, a trade-off that makes sense in the specific context of that bird's environment. The bird has not lost flight so much as it has gained something else: the freedom to grow larger, to invest in different capabilities, to specialize in ways that flying birds cannot. Flightlessness has evolved independently in birds over 1,000 times. It has happened in rails and ducks, in parrots and pigeons, in cormorants and grebes. It has happened on virtually every island of significant size that has been colonized by birds. This is not coincidence. It is a pattern, one that tells us something fundamental about the evolutionary pressures that shape life in isolated environments. The birds we will explore tonight represent different chapters in this ongoing story. Each species took its own path toward flightlessness, driven by its own unique set of circumstances. Some abandoned flight to master the water. Others did so to dominate the land. Some became giants. Others remained small. But all of them reveal something profound about the adaptability of life, about how organisms can transform themselves to match their world. Let us begin with birds that traded the air for something almost as fluid: the sea. Stand on the rocky shores of Antarctica, where ice meets ocean in an endless collision of elements, and you might witness one of nature's most graceful paradoxes. A penguin launches itself from the water, bursting upward with such force that its entire body clears the surface, arcing through the air before landing with surprising delicacy on the ice. In that brief moment of aerial transit, you see a bird that cannot fly doing something that looks remarkably like flight, just not through air. Penguins are perhaps the most successful flightless birds on Earth. There are 18 recognized species, ranging from the heat-adapted Galapagos penguins living on the equator to the emperor penguins enduring Antarctic winters where temperatures plunge below -40 degrees. They inhabit some of the planet's most challenging environments, yet they thrive there, demonstrating that flightlessness, far from being a limitation, can be the key to unlocking entirely new ways of life. The story of penguins begins roughly 60 to 62 million years ago, shortly after the extinction of the non-avian dinosaurs. The oldest known penguin fossils date from this time, found along what was then the coast of New Zealand. These ancient penguins were already flightless, already adapted for aquatic life. But they were different from modern penguins in intriguing ways. Some were giants. The Colossus penguin, discovered in Antarctica, stood nearly as tall as a human and may have weighed up to 115 kilograms. These massive birds patrolled polar seas when Antarctica was still relatively warm, before ice sheets covered the continent. What drove penguins to abandon flight for swimming? The answer lies in a fundamental biomechanical constraint. Birds that both fly and dive face an irreconcilable conflict in wing design. Wings optimized for flight are long and light, with large surface areas to generate lift in the thin medium of air. But water is 800 times denser than air. Long, light wings that work well in air become cumbersome in water, generating excessive drag and requiring enormous effort to move. Some birds have managed a compromise. Guillemots and murres, relatives of puffins, can both fly and dive. They use their wings for underwater propulsion, just as penguins do, essentially flying through water. But maintaining this dual capability comes at an extreme cost. Research has shown that guillemots have the highest flight costs of any bird ever measured. Their flight muscles must work at the absolute limit of vertebrate muscle performance. They burn energy at rates that would be unsustainable for extended periods. Every dive makes them more efficient swimmers, but every flight becomes harder. Penguins resolved this conflict by going all in on the water. Their wings became flippers, rigid, flattened, and powerful. Unlike the wings of flying birds, which must fold and extend, penguin flippers are held stiff, with bones that have fused together and flattened into paddle-like structures. The humerus, radius, and ulna are shortened and broadened. The joints have limited flexibility. This rigidity, which would be disastrous for flight, is perfect for swimming. The transformation goes beyond bone structure. While flying birds have hollow bones to reduce weight, penguins have solid, dense bones that reduce buoyancy, making it easier to dive deep. Their flight muscles, which in flying birds power only the downstroke, have been modified to generate force on both downstroke and upstroke, providing continuous propulsion through water. The pectoral muscles alone can account for roughly 25% of a penguin's body weight, similar to or even greater than the proportion in some flying birds. But these muscles are now optimized for an entirely different medium. Watch a penguin swimming underwater and you see the payoff for these adaptations. The flippers stroke in a figure-8 pattern, generating lift and thrust with each movement. The bird literally flies through water, maneuvering with astonishing precision. Gentoo penguins can reach speeds of 22 miles per hour underwater, Emperor penguins can dive to depths exceeding 500 meters, holding their breath for more than 20 minutes. They pursue fish, squid, and krill with the agility of aerial predators, executing tight turns and sudden accelerations that would be impossible for a bird with wings designed for air. The penguin's body has become a perfect torpedo. The legs are set far back, acting as rudders for steering. The feet are webbed for additional thrust during slower swimming. The plumage is extraordinarily dense, with 70 to 100 feathers per square inch, creating a waterproof barrier that traps air for insulation. Beneath the skin, a thick layer of blubber provides both insulation and buoyancy control. Even the bird's shape, streamlined, tapered at both ends, minimizes drag. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of penguin swimming involves something discovered only in recent years. Emperor penguins can release tiny bubbles from their feathers while swimming, creating a lubricating layer of air around their bodies that dramatically reduces friction with the water. This bubble coating technique, called biosonar lubrication, allows them to double or triple their swimming speed when needed, such as when leaping onto ice or escaping predators like leopard seals. The microscopic structure of their feather filaments, combined with the ability to control air release, creates a natural version of the technology engineers have tried to develop for submarine and torpedo propulsion. Each penguin species has refined these underwater abilities for specific niches. Little penguins, the smallest species at just over a kilogram, hunt in shallow coastal waters, rarely diving below 60 meters. They live around Australia and New Zealand, nesting in burrows and crevices along the shore. Magellanic penguins of South America migrate hundreds of kilometers between breeding colonies and feeding grounds. Their longer, more streamlined bodies, built for efficient long-distance travel. African penguins have adapted to the warm waters of southern Africa, relying on the cold Bengala Current to provide food and regulate their body temperature. The crested penguins, rockhopper, macaroni, royal and others, are distinguished by elaborate yellow and black plumes adorning their heads. These birds specialize in feeding on krill and small fish in the nutrient-rich waters of the sub-Antarctic. They often leap from the water onto rocky shores, using their powerful legs to spring upward before catching themselves with their flippers. Watching a rockhopper penguin navigate a wave-battered cliff, hopping from rock to rock with apparent confidence, you see how thoroughly these birds have committed to a terrestrial and aquatic lifestyle. Emperor penguins represent the extreme of penguin adaptation. At over a meter tall and weighing up to 45 kilograms, they are the largest penguins alive today. They breed during the Antarctic winter, enduring some of the harshest conditions any animal faces. Males incubate single eggs on their feet, tucked beneath a warm fold of skin, while fasting for months in temperatures that can drop below -50 degrees Celsius. They huddle together in groups of thousands, taking turns in the center where it is warmest, demonstrating social cooperation on a scale rarely seen in birds. The emperor penguin's diving ability exceeds all other penguins. They routinely dive below 300 meters and have been recorded at depths exceeding 500 meters, where the pressure is crushing and light barely penetrates. At such depths, they hunt fish and squid in near total darkness. Their blood carries specialized hemoglobin that binds oxygen more efficiently. Their muscles are packed with myoglobin, a protein that stores oxygen. They can slow their heart rate dramatically, reducing oxygen consumption during long dives. When they surface, they breathe rapidly to reload oxygen stores before diving again. But even among these supreme swimmers, genetic studies reveal something fascinating. Modern penguin species all descended from a common ancestor approximately 20 million years ago, and that ancestor was already flightless. The transformation from flying bird to penguin happened earlier, in the Paleocene or early Eocene. We do not have direct fossil evidence of the intermediate stages, but we can infer the process. Some early seabird, perhaps resembling a modern petrel or shearwater, began pursuing prey underwater. Over time, individuals better at swimming left more offspring. Wings became shorter, denser. Bones became heavier. Eventually, a threshold was crossed, and flight became impossible. But by then, these birds had already become such effective swimmers that the loss of flight was not a loss at all. The penguin lineage then radiated into many forms, adapting to different oceans, different prey, different climates. Some species lost ground to mammalian competitors and went extinct, like the giant penguins that once swam in polar seas. Others found niches where their unique adaptations gave them advantages nothing else could match. The result is a group of birds that have colonized vast stretches of the southern oceans, from tropical islands to Antarctic ice shelves, all without the ability to fly. Consider what this means. Penguins gave up flight, one of the most celebrated abilities in the animal kingdom, and in return gained access to an entire dimension that flying birds can barely touch. They can hunt at depths where light fades to nothing. They can pursue prey that swims faster than most flying birds can fly. They can withstand cold that would kill almost any other bird. They have thrived for tens of millions of years in some of Earth's most unforgiving environments. This is the paradox at the heart of flightlessness. What looks like a loss is often a gain. What appears to be a limitation is frequently an opportunity. Penguins don't suffer from being unable to fly. They benefit from being free of its constraints. If penguins mastered the water, the ratites mastered the land. These are the giants: ostriches, emus, cassowaries, rheas, kiwis, and the extinct moas and elephant birds. Some stand nearly 3 meters tall. Some weigh over 100 kilograms. They are, with the exception of the chicken-sized kiwis, among the largest birds that have ever lived, and every single one of them has lost the ability to fly. For most of the past century, scientists believed that ratites shared a common flightless ancestor that lived on the ancient supercontinent of Gondwana. When Gondwana broke apart roughly 180 million years ago, fragments drifted to become South America, Africa, Australia, Antarctica, and New Zealand. Each fragment, the theory went, carried populations of flightless birds that evolved into the ratites we see today. This explained why these similar birds ended up on continents separated by vast oceans. They were already there when the continents split. It was an elegant story, and it seemed to make perfect sense. Ratites share many anatomical features. They all have flat breastbones, lacking the prominent keel where flight muscles attach. Their wings are reduced to varying degrees, from the large useless wings of ostriches to the tiny stick-like remnants in kiwis, to the complete absence of wings in moas. Their feathers lack the interlocking barbules that create the smooth, air-resistant surface necessary for flight. Instead, their plumage is soft, almost hair-like, flowing loosely rather than forming rigid veins. But in the early 2000s, genetic analyses began to unravel this tidy narrative. When scientists compared the DNA of ratites, they discovered something unexpected. These birds were not as closely related as their similar appearances suggested. In fact, some ratites were more closely related to flying birds than to other ratites. The tinamous, small flying birds of Central and South America, nested genetically within the ratite family tree. They were not distant cousins of ratites. They were ratites themselves, or at least their closest living relatives. This finding changed everything. If flightless ratites had a flying relative nested within their family tree, it meant one of two things. Either tinamous had re-evolved the ability to fly after their ancestors had lost it, or flightlessness had evolved independently multiple times within the ratite lineage. The first option seemed impossible. There is no confirmed case of a flightless bird re-evolving flight. The second option meant that the Gondwana breakup theory was wrong. Further research confirmed the more radical explanation. Ratites had not been stranded on different continents by continental drift. Instead, their flying ancestors had dispersed to different landmasses after Gondwana split, then independently evolved flightlessness on each continent. This happened at least 3 times, possibly as many as 6. Ostriches in Africa, rheas in South America, emus and cassowaries in Australia, kiwis and moas in New Zealand, elephant birds in Madagascar. Each lineage lost flight separately in response to similar evolutionary pressures. What were those pressures? The answer lies in timing. The earliest ratite fossils appear shortly after the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event 66 million years ago, the catastrophe that killed the non-avian dinosaurs. For over 100 million years, dinosaurs had dominated terrestrial ecosystems. Large herbivorous dinosaurs browsed on plants. Large carnivorous dinosaurs hunted them. Birds existed, but they were mostly small, occupying niches that large dinosaurs couldn't access. When the dinosaurs vanished, they left behind empty niches. The continents suddenly lacked large terrestrial herbivores and the large terrestrial predators that fed on them. Mammals would eventually fill many of these roles, but in the immediate aftermath of the extinction, mammals were still small. This created a window of opportunity. Birds that could exploit the resources dinosaurs had used, fruits, seeds, leaves, shoots at ground level, suddenly had a chance to grow larger, to become the dominant terrestrial vertebrates. But large size and flight are difficult to combine. The energetic costs of flight increase disproportionately with body mass. A bird twice as heavy needs wings far more than twice as large, and muscles far more than twice as powerful to stay aloft. There's a practical upper limit to how large a flying bird can be, and it's much smaller than the potential size of a terrestrial animal. So, these early ratites faced a choice, though not a conscious one. They could remain small and flying, competing with the countless other birds that filled the skies. Or they could grow larger, abandon flight, and claim the terrestrial niches left vacant by dinosaurs. Different lineages on different continents made the same choice. The ostrich is perhaps the most iconic ratite. Native to Africa, it is the largest living bird, standing up to 2.8 meters tall and weighing up to 156 kilograms. Males are striking in black and white plumage. Females are brown. Their long necks allow them to browse on plants at heights most terrestrial animals cannot reach. Their legs are extraordinarily powerful, capable of delivering kicks with enough force to kill a lion, and they can run at sustained speeds of up to 70 kilometers per hour, making them among the fastest terrestrial animals. Ostriches live in savannas and semi-arid regions, often in small groups that move across vast territories searching for food and water. They are omnivorous, eating primarily plants, but also insects, small reptiles, and whatever else they encounter. Their long legs and keen eyesight allow them to spot predators from great distances, and their speed makes them difficult to catch. Interestingly, ostriches retain large wings despite being flightless. These wings serve several functions. Males spread them during courtship displays, revealing the striking black and white plumage. Both sexes use them for balance while running, acting almost like the spoilers on a race car to help with sudden changes in direction. They also provide shade for chicks and may help with temperature regulation by increasing surface area for heat dissipation. Emus, native to Australia, are the second largest living birds, standing up to 1.9 meters tall and weighing 45 to 55 kilograms. They have shaggy brown plumage and long legs built for running, though they rarely exceed 50 kilometers per hour. Emus are more solitary than ostriches, though they may form loose groups when resources are abundant. They are nomadic, moving across Australia's varied landscapes in search of food and water, capable of travelling enormous distances. Emus are omnivores, with a particular fondness for plants that contain high water content, which helps them survive in Australia's often arid interior. They play important ecological roles as seed dispersers, consuming fruits whole and depositing the seeds far from the parent plant. Some plant species may depend on emus for dispersal. Cassowaries are the most enigmatic of the large ratites. There are 3 species, all living in the rainforests of New Guinea and northeastern Australia. They are shorter than emus, but much heavier and more powerfully built, with thick legs and large dagger-like claws. Their heads are adorned with a distinctive helmet-like casque, the function of which remains debated. It may amplify their deep booming calls, help them push through dense vegetation, or serve as a display structure. Cassowaries are frugivores, feeding primarily on fallen fruit in the rainforest. Like emus, they are important seed dispersers, and some rainforest trees appear to have evolved large fruits specifically to attract cassowaries. But cassowaries are also famously dangerous. When threatened, they can deliver powerful kicks, and their claws can inflict serious, even fatal, wounds. They are generally shy and avoid humans, but when cornered or protecting chicks, they become aggressive. Signs in Australian parks warn visitors not to approach them. Rheas, the South American ratites, resemble small ostriches and occupy similar ecological roles. The greater rhea stands up to 1.4 meters tall and weighs up to 40 kilograms. Rheas live on grasslands and open woodlands, moving in groups and feeding on plants and small animals. Males perform an unusual breeding behavior. They mate with multiple females, then build a nest where the females lay their eggs. A single nest may contain eggs from several females, and the male alone incubates them and raises the chicks, aggressively defending them from predators. And then there are the kiwis, the great exception to the ratite pattern. Kiwis are tiny by ratite standards, about the size of chickens, weighing 1 to 3.3 kilograms. They live in New Zealand's forests, emerging at night to probe the soil with their long, sensitive beaks, searching for invertebrates. They have the best sense of smell of any bird, with nostrils at the tip of their beak rather than at the base. Their wings are so reduced as to be invisible beneath their shaggy plumage. Kiwis lay eggs that are enormous relative to their body size. A single egg can weigh up to a quarter of the female's body weight, one of the largest egg-to-body ratios of any bird. The chicks hatch fully feathered and largely independent, foraging on their own within days. Kiwis are long-lived, with some individuals surviving 40 years or more in the wild. Why did kiwis remain small when other ratites became giants? The answer may lie in competition. New Zealand was home to another group of ratites, the moas, which occupied the large terrestrial herbivore niches. Moas ranged from turkey-sized to the massive Dinornis robustus, which stood up to 3.7 meters tall and weighed over 200 kilograms. With moas filling the large bird niches, kiwis specialized in a different role: nocturnal, ground-dwelling insectivores. This kept them small, but it also kept them alive when humans arrived, and hunted the larger moas to extinction. The moas are gone, victims of human hunting and habitat destruction after Polynesian settlers reached New Zealand around 700 years ago. But their fossils tell us about an extraordinary radiation of flightless birds. There were at least 9 species of moa, occupying diverse habitats from coastal forests to alpine shrublands. Some had long necks for browsing high vegetation. Others had shorter, stouter builds. They were New Zealand's dominant herbivores, shaping plant communities and supporting predators like the massive Haast's eagle, which had a wingspan exceeding 2 meters and specialized in hunting moas. Madagascar had its own giants, the elephant birds. The largest species, Vorhombe titan, may have weighed up to 860 kilograms, making it one of the heaviest birds ever known. Elephant birds were herbivores, probably feeding on fruits and plants in Madagascar's forests. They laid eggs larger than any known eggs from any animal. Some measured over 30 centimeters long and could hold over 8 liters of liquid. These birds survived until roughly 1,000 years ago, when human settlement and habitat alteration drove them extinct. All these birds, ostriches, emus, cassowaries, rheas, kiwis, moas, elephant birds, evolved flightlessness independently. They do not share a common flightless ancestor, but they do share common selective pressures: the absence of large mammalian predators or competitors, the availability of ground-level food resources, the advantages of large body size in their respective environments. And they share the solution: giving up flight to claim these opportunities. The ratites show us that flightlessness is not a quirk or an aberration. It is a predictable evolutionary response to predictable environmental conditions. When the conditions are right, when the sky matters less than the ground, birds will walk the same path again and again. There is perhaps no place on Earth that better illustrates the evolution of flightless birds than New Zealand. This isolated island nation, located in the southwestern Pacific, was one of the last large landmasses to be colonized by humans. For millions of years, it existed as a world apart, a place where birds filled roles that elsewhere belonged to mammals. New Zealand separated from Gondwana roughly 80 million years ago, before mammals had diversified into the multitude of forms we see today. When it drifted into isolation, it carried with it only a few mammalian species, several species of bats, no terrestrial mammals, no predators prowling the forest floor or climbing through the canopy. no herbivores competing for resources. This created conditions unlike anywhere else, conditions where birds could evolve without the constraints that mammals imposed on bird evolution everywhere else. And evolve they did. New Zealand became home to an astonishing array of flightless birds. In addition to the moas and kiwis, there were flightless geese, flightless rails, flightless wrens, flightless ducks. There were flightless members of families that, elsewhere in the world, never lost the ability to fly. At least 16 species of flightless birds existed in New Zealand when Polynesians arrived in the late 13th century. Many are now extinct, but several survive, offering glimpses into this unique evolutionary experiment. The kakapo is perhaps the most extraordinary of New Zealand's surviving flightless birds. It is the world's only flightless parrot. It is also the world's heaviest parrot, with males weighing up to 4 kilograms in breeding condition. It is nocturnal, solitary, and herbivorous. It has a breeding system unlike any other parrot, where males gather at traditional display grounds called leks and compete for females by producing deep booming calls that can be heard over a kilometre away. Everything about the kakapo seems improbable. Its scientific name, Strigops habroptilus, translates roughly to owl-faced soft-feathered, and indeed, its face has a distinctly owl-like appearance, with forward-facing eyes surrounded by facial discs of modified feathers. Its plumage is a mottled green and yellow, providing excellent camouflage against the forest floor. Its beak is large and powerful, adapted for processing the tough plant materials that make up its diet: leaves, stems, roots, fruits, and pollen. The kakapo cannot fly, but it can climb. Using its strong claws and beak, it ascends into trees to feed on fruits and flowers, particularly the mast fruits of rimu trees. When it needs to descend or move between trees, it spreads its wings and parachutes to the ground, gliding at a steep angle but incapable of generating lift. Its wings are too small, its flight muscles too reduced, its bones too heavy. At most, a kakapo might travel a few meters horizontally for every meter it descends. Why did kakapos become flightless? The answer lies in the absence of mammalian predators and the presence of abundant ground-level food resources. In a forest with no ground predators, a parrot could feed on the forest floor, nest on the ground, and live its entire life without needing to escape into the air. Over time, kakapos grew larger, their legs stronger, their beaks more powerful. They invested in body, mass and processing ability, rather than flight capability, and they thrived. But the adaptations that made kakapos successful in predator-free New Zealand made them extraordinarily vulnerable when predators arrived. Kakapos have a defensive strategy that worked perfectly against avian predators like the Haast's eagle, which hunted by sight from above. When threatened, a kakapo freezes completely, relying on its camouflage to avoid detection. Against a visual predator from above, this works. But against a mammalian predator like a stoat or a cat, which hunts by scent and on the ground, freezing is suicidal. The kakapo sits still, and the predator finds it easily. Humans brought those predators to New Zealand. Polynesian settlers brought rats, which ate kakapo eggs and chicks. European colonizers brought cats, stoats, ferrets, dogs, all of which preyed on adult kakapos. Habitat destruction compounded the problem. By the mid-20th century, kakapos were thought extinct. Then, in 1977, a population of about 200 birds was discovered on Stewart Island, off New Zealand's southern coast. But even there, introduced cats were decimating them. Conservation efforts began in earnest. All remaining kakapos were evacuated to predator-free islands. Intensive management followed: supplemental feeding, medical care, artificial insemination, round-the-clock monitoring. Every bird was fitted with a radio transmitter. Every nest was watched. Chick rearing success was optimized through human intervention. The population slowly recovered. Today, there are about 250 kakapos alive, each one named and tracked. They live on several predator-free islands and in a mainland sanctuary surrounded by a predator-proof fence. The kakapo exemplifies the double-edged nature of island evolution. In isolation from predators, birds can evolve remarkable specializations, growing large, abandoning flight, developing unique behaviors. But those same specializations become catastrophic vulnerabilities when humans introduce predators and alter habitats. The kakapo's flightlessness, which served it well for millions of years, nearly drove it to extinction in a few centuries. Kiwis faced similar challenges, but have fared better, partly because they're smaller and breed faster than kakapos. Still, all 5 kiwi species are threatened by introduced predators, particularly stoats, which kill both adults and chicks. Conservation efforts focus on predator control in kiwi habitats and captive rearing programs to boost chick survival. New Zealand was also home to numerous species of flightless rails. Rails, a family of water birds, have lost flight independently more than any other bird family, well over 100 times across islands worldwide. In New Zealand, several rail species became flightless, including the weka and the takahe. The weka is a chicken-sized rail, robust and curious, often approaching humans without fear. Wekas are omnivorous and opportunistic, eating everything from insects and eggs to fruits and carrion. They are still relatively common in parts of New Zealand, though predation by introduced mammals has reduced their range. The takahe, once thought extinct, was rediscovered in 1948 in a remote valley in Fiordland. These large, colourful rails have brilliant blue and green plumage and strong red beaks, adapted for processing tough alpine vegetation. They live in small populations in alpine grasslands, feeding on snow tussock. Like kakapos, takahe face intense conservation management to protect them from predators and habitat loss. New Zealand's flightless ducks included the Auckland Islands merganser and the Finch's duck, both now extinct. These ducks, like other New Zealand birds, evolved in the absence of mammalian predators and became flightless, only to be driven to extinction when humans arrived with their entourage of invasive species. The pattern repeats across New Zealand's avian history. Flightlessness evolved again and again because the islands lacked mammalian predators. Each time, birds found that they could abandon flight and specialize in ground-based lifestyles without suffering the usual costs. Each time, they thrived until humans and their companion animals arrived. And each time, those adaptations that had been advantageous for millions of years became deadly liabilities. Today, New Zealand is working to turn back the clock. The country has embarked on an ambitious program called Predator-Free New Zealand, which aims to eliminate all introduced mammalian predators, rats, stoats, possums, and others, from the entire country by 2050. If successful, it would allow native birds, including flightless species, to recolonize their former habitats without intensive management. It's an enormous undertaking, But New Zealand has experience. Numerous offshore islands have been successfully cleared of predators, creating sanctuaries where kakapos, takahe, and other threatened species are rebuilding their populations. New Zealand's experience offers both hope and caution. It shows how quickly flightless birds can succumb to introduced threats, but also how effective dedicated conservation can be. It demonstrates that islands create conditions favouring flightlessness, but also that those conditions are fragile, easily disrupted by the arrival of new species. Most importantly, it reveals how much we stand to lose if we allow unique evolutionary experiments to end in extinction. If New Zealand represents the extreme of island bird evolution, it is far from the only example. Islands worldwide have been evolutionary crucibles, repeatedly producing flightless birds from flying ancestors. This pattern is so consistent that it has been called one of the most predictable outcomes of island colonization. Why do islands so reliably generate flightless birds? The answer involves several interconnected factors, all stemming from the unique characteristics of island ecosystems. First, islands typically lack mammalian predators. Large carnivores are poor dispersers across ocean barriers. Cats, dogs, weasels, foxes, snakes, the predators that make ground dwelling a dangerous lifestyle on continents, are usually absent from remote islands. When birds colonize these islands, they enter an environment where staying on the ground carries far less risk than it does on the mainland. The selective pressure that maintains flight as an escape mechanism disappears. Second, island resources are often accessible without flight. Many islands have abundant food at ground level or in shallow water. Fruits, seeds, invertebrates, marine life washed ashore. Birds don't need to fly to find food. They can walk, forage systematically, and process what they find at a leisurely pace. Flight becomes less essential for survival and reproduction. Third, islands often have fewer bird species than mainland areas of comparable size. With less competition, colonizing birds can expand into niches that on the mainland might be occupied by other species. A rail on an island might become a generalist omnivore, feeding on resources that on the continent would be divided among multiple specialized species. This reduced competition allows birds to grow larger, invest in stronger legs and beaks, and specialize in ground-based foraging. Fourth, islands impose costs on maintaining flight. Strong winds around many islands make flight energetically expensive and dangerous. Resources may be limited, making the high metabolic demands of flight harder to sustain. If birds can meet their needs without flying, natural selection favors individuals that invest less in expensive flight muscles and more in other traits. These factors combine to create what biologists call an island syndrome, a suite of characteristics that island animals, particularly birds, repeatedly evolve. Island birds tend to be larger than their mainland relatives. They have longer legs and smaller wings. They are less fearful of predators. They have lower metabolic rates. They produce fewer offspring, but invest more in each one. And very often, they lose the ability to fly. The dodo of Mauritius is perhaps the most famous example. Dodos were giant, flightless pigeons, descended from flying ancestors that somehow reached Mauritius, a volcanic island in the Indian Ocean that formed roughly 8 million years ago. With no mammalian predators and abundant food, these pigeons evolved over millions of years into the dodos that Dutch sailors encountered in 1598. Descriptions and paintings from the 17th century show the dodo as a large, bulky bird with tiny wings, thick legs, and a massive hooked beak. Modern analyses of sub-fossil bones suggest dodos stood about 65 to 75 centimeters tall and weighed 10 to 18 kilograms, though their exact appearance remains uncertain because only fragmentary remains exist. They probably had grey-brown plumage, a bare face, and a tuft of curly feathers on their rear end. Dodos lived in Mauritius's forests, feeding on fruits, seeds, and possibly other plant materials. They nested on the ground, laying a single large egg. They had no fear of the sailors who arrived on their island, approaching them without caution, a behavior that proved fatal. Sailors killed dodos for food, introduced rats, pigs, and monkeys, destroyed their nests, and ate their eggs and chicks. Habitat destruction eliminated their forest homes. Within less than a century of human contact, dodos were extinct. The last confirmed sighting was in 1662, though some reports suggest a few may have survived until 1680. The dodo has become a symbol of extinction, the most famous example of a species destroyed by human activity. But it's important to understand that the dodo was not poorly adapted or evolutionarily backward. In the context of Mauritius before humans arrived, dodos were well suited to their environment. They could exploit food sources efficiently, grow large on abundant resources, and reproduce successfully without needing flight. The problem was not with the dodo. The problem was that humans radically altered the environment faster than dodos could adapt. Mauritius was home to other flightless birds as well, including the Mauritius blue pigeon and several species of rails, all now extinct. The nearby island of Rodriguez had its own giant flightless bird, the Rodriguez solitaire, similar to the dodo but slightly taller and more slender. It too was driven to extinction by humans and introduced species. Across the Pacific, virtually every island of significant size supported at least one flightless bird species before human arrival. The Hawaiian Islands had flightless geese, rails, and ibises. Many Pacific islands had flightless rails, so many that scientists estimate rails have lost flight over 130 times on different islands. The Galapagos had flightless cormorants. The Indian Ocean islands had numerous flightless species, most now extinct. Why are rails so prone to flightlessness? Rails are ground-dwelling waterbirds that feed in marshes, wetlands, and coastal areas. They're weak flyers to begin with, often reluctant to take to the air. When rails colonize islands, usually by being blown off course during migration, they find themselves in environments where their weak flight is even less useful. With no mammalian predators to escape from, they quickly evolve toward flightlessness. The transformation can happen remarkably fast, possibly within a few thousand years. One extraordinary example comes from the Aldabra Atoll in the Indian Ocean. The white-throated rail, a flying species from Madagascar, colonized Aldabra at least twice. The first time, roughly 136,000 to 240,000 years ago, the rails became flightless. Then, a catastrophic flood inundated the atoll, wiping out the flightless population. When sea levels fell and the atoll dried out, white-throated rails colonized it, again and again evolved flightlessness. This is one of the clearest examples of iterative evolution, where nearly identical evolutionary changes occur twice in the same lineage in response to the same environmental pressures. Recent research has revealed an even more fascinating pattern. Even birds that retain the ability to fly show measurable shifts toward flightlessness when they colonize islands. scientists examining thousands of museum specimens found that island birds have smaller flight muscles and longer legs than their mainland relatives, even when both can still fly. On islands with fewer predators, these shifts are more pronounced. Birds like hummingbirds, which depend completely on flight for feeding, still show reduced flight muscles on predator-free islands compared to the mainland. This suggests that the evolution of flightlessness is not a sudden transition, but a gradual trajectory. Island birds start shifting resources from flight to other functions as soon as they colonize an island. Most remain capable of flight, but they're on a path that, given enough time without predators, could lead to complete flightlessness. The birds we recognize as flightless are simply the ones that have traveled furthest along this path. This also helps explain why island birds are so vulnerable to introduced predators. Even the ones that can fly have reduced flight capability compared to mainland birds. Their smaller flight muscles mean slower takeoffs, less acceleration, reduced maneuverability. When cats, rats, or other predators arrive, these birds are less able to escape than their mainland relatives would be. Many island extinctions involve birds that could fly but couldn't fly well enough to avoid novel predators. The island pattern teaches us that flightlessness is not an accident or a rare quirk. It is a predictable response to a specific set of ecological conditions: isolation, absence of predators, accessible resources, limited competition. Wherever these conditions exist, birds will likely evolve toward flightlessness. And wherever these conditions are disrupted, particularly by the introduction of predators, flightless birds will likely face extinction unless we intervene. Not all flightless birds have completely lost the ability to fly. Some species exist in a transitional state, capable of flight, but barely so, or with individuals that vary in flight capability. These birds offer unique insights into how flightlessness evolves, showing us evolution in action. The steamer ducks of southern South America are perhaps the best example. This genus, Taquieres, includes 4 species that inhabit the coasts and islands of Chile, Argentina, and the Falkland Islands. 3 species are completely flightless. The 4th, the flying steamer duck, is mostly flightless but retains limited flight capability. Steamer ducks get their name from their behavior when swimming rapidly. They thrash their wings against the water in a circular paddling motion, creating a spray that resembles a paddle wheel steamboat. This wing-assisted swimming allows them to move across the water with impressive speed, escaping predators or establishing territories. The 3 flightless species, the Magellanic, white-headed, and Falkland steamer ducks, are large, heavily built birds that live along rocky coastlines. They feed primarily on mollusks and crustaceans, diving in shallow waters and using their powerful beaks to pry shellfish off rocks. They are aggressive, territorial birds, and males will fight viciously to defend breeding sites, using the sharp spurs on their wings as weapons. The flying steamer duck is smaller and has longer wings than the flightless species. But even this flying species rarely flies. Most individuals appear incapable of sustained flight. They might manage short, labored flights close to the water surface, but they prefer to escape by running across the water or diving. Interestingly, the largest males of the flying steamer duck are completely flightless, unable to get off the water no matter how hard they flap. Only the smaller individuals, particularly females and young birds, can achieve brief flights. What makes steamer ducks especially interesting is their recent evolutionary history. Genetic studies show that all 4 species diverged from a common ancestor only about 15,000 years ago, during the last glacial period. This is extremely recent in evolutionary time. The species are still so closely related that the flying and flightless steamer, ducks on the Falkland Islands, are genetically indistinguishable, even though they're traditionally classified as separate species. This suggests that steamer ducks are undergoing a modern transition to flightlessness. We are watching, in real time, the process by which birds lose flight. The variation within the flying steamer duck, where some individuals can fly and others cannot, shows that flight capability exists on a continuum. There's no clear boundary between flying and flightless. Instead, there's a gradient, with individuals distributed along it, based on their size, sex, and genetics. Researchers have identified a candidate gene, DYRK1A, that may be involved in the evolution of flightlessness in steamer ducks. This gene affects limb development in many species. Changes in how and when this gene is expressed could alter the development of wings and legs, shifting the balance toward terrestrial or aquatic locomotion and away from flight. The steamer ducks demonstrate several important principles. First, flightlessness can evolve rapidly, within thousands rather than millions of years, when conditions favor it. Second, flight capability is not binary, but continuous, with populations and even individuals varying in their abilities. Third, the same environmental pressures can independently produce similar evolutionary outcomes, as multiple steamer duck lineages have lost flight separately in response to similar coastal marine environments. Other birds show similar patterns of partial or variable flightlessness. Some island populations of birds that are fully flighted on the mainland have evolved reduced flight capability, though not complete flightlessness. The Galapagos flightless cormorant is completely flightless, but other cormorant species that live on islands show reductions in wing size and flight capability compared to mainland relatives. In New Zealand, the takahe and kakapo are fully flightless, but other rails on the islands show varying degrees of flight reduction. The weka can flutter short distances, but cannot sustain flight. This suggests that rails on New Zealand may have evolved flightlessness through a similar gradual process, with some species having gone further along the trajectory than others. These partially flightless birds are vulnerable to environmental changes. Because they exist in a transitional state, they often lack both the full benefits of flight and the full benefits of complete flightlessness. They've invested enough in terrestrial or aquatic locomotion that their flight is compromised, but they haven't gained enough compensatory advantages to fully offset the loss of aerial escape capability. When novel predators arrive, these birds can be caught in the worst of both worlds. Yet studying them gives us invaluable information. By examining the genetics, anatomy, and behavior of birds at different stages of flight loss, scientists can reconstruct the process step by step. They can identify which genes change first, which body structures are modified early versus late in the process, which environmental factors accelerate or slow the transition. This knowledge helps us understand not just flightlessness, but evolution itself, how complex traits are gained and lost, how organisms balance trade-offs, how new species emerge from old ones. For most of history, the question of how birds lose flight could only be answered through comparative anatomy and speculation. Scientists could examine the bones, muscles, and feathers of flightless birds and describe how they differed from flying birds, but they couldn't explain precisely how those differences arose during development, or what genetic changes drove them. That changed with the advent of genomic sequencing and molecular analysis. Now, scientists can compare the genomes of flightless birds with those of their flying relatives, identifying specific genes that have changed and understanding how those genetic changes translate into anatomical differences. One of the most comprehensive studies examined over a dozen flightless ratite species, including an extinct moa, whose DNA was extracted from subfossil toe bones. The researchers compared these flightless birds with their flying relatives, looking at both protein-coding genes and regulatory regions of the genome. The results were striking. While protein-coding genes showed wide variation between species, each flightless lineage had its own unique set of mutations in structural genes. The regulatory regions showed remarkable similarity. Different flightless species had independently evolved changes in the same regulatory pathways, the genetic switches that control when and where genes are turned on or off during development. This pattern makes sense when you consider how bodies are built. Protein-coding genes are like individual parts in a machine: gears, levers, motors. Regulatory elements are like the instructions for assembling those parts. You can build very different machines from the same parts just by changing the assembly instructions. Similarly, you can create very different body plans from the same genes by changing how those genes are expressed during development. In flightless birds, many of the regulatory changes affect genes involved in limb development. During embryonic development, the same fundamental genetic programs pattern both wings and legs. Subtle shifts in when these programs are activated, how long they run, or how intensely they operate can dramatically alter the final proportions of the limbs. Make the wing development program run for less time or at lower intensity, and you get shorter, lighter wings. Make the leg development program run longer or more intensely, and you get longer, stronger legs. Scientists tested this by tagging regulatory regions in bird genomes with fluorescent markers. In flying birds, these markers glowed brightly during wing development, indicating active gene expression. In flightless birds, the same markers showed much reduced activity. The regulatory elements had lost binding sites for transcription factors, the molecular switches that turn genes on. Without these binding sites, the genes that build wings were expressed at lower levels, producing smaller, weaker wings. Importantly, the same regulatory regions were affected across multiple independent flightless lineages. Ostriches, emus, kiwis, and extinct moas all showed changes in similar developmental pathways, even though they evolved flightlessness separately. This is convergent evolution at the molecular level. Different species finding the same genetic solutions to the same adaptive challenges. This explains why flightlessness has evolved so many times in birds, but has never been reversed. Evolving flightlessness requires disabling or down-regulating developmental programs, essentially turning down the volume on wing-building genes. This is relatively easy. Mutations that reduce gene expression are common, and many different mutations can have similar effects. But re-evolving flight would require rebuilding those developmental programs, turning the volume back up in precisely coordinated ways. This would require multiple specific mutations occurring in the right order, which is vanishingly unlikely. The genetic architecture of flightlessness also helps explain why it can happen rapidly. Major anatomical changes don't require thousands of mutations in protein-coding genes. Instead, they can result from a handful of changes in regulatory elements that have cascading effects on development. Alter one regulatory region, and you might affect the development of multiple structures simultaneously. Shorter wings, heavier bones, reduced keels, smaller flight muscles, all from a single genetic change. Environmental cues might even trigger some of these changes. There's evidence that in some species, the expression of flight-related genes can be influenced by environmental factors during development. A bird developing in an environment with abundant food, no predators, and limited need for flight might, through epigenetic mechanisms, express wing development genes at lower levels than a bird of the same species developing in a more challenging environment. Over many generations, variants that consistently express these genes at lower levels in predator-free environments would be favored, eventually fixing the changes in the population's genome. This suggests that flightlessness might sometimes evolve through a process called genetic accommodation, where environmentally induced changes in development become genetically hardwired over time. A bird species colonizing an island might initially show phenotypic plasticity, with individuals varying in wing development based on environmental conditions. If the island environment consistently favors reduced flight, natural selection would favor genotypes that reliably produce smaller wings regardless of environment, transforming a flexible trait into a fixed one. Penguins present an interesting case because their transition to flightlessness involved not just losing flight, but gaining underwater flight. Genetic studies of penguins have identified changes in genes related to vision, blood oxygen transport, bone density, and thermoregulation, among others. These changes adapted penguins to their aquatic lifestyle. Some changes appear unique to penguins, while others are shared with other diving birds, suggesting different evolutionary paths to similar solutions. Interestingly, penguins have one of the slowest rates of genetic evolution of any bird group. Despite inhabiting highly variable environments and undergoing dramatic changes in body size across species, penguin genomes change more slowly than those of most other birds. This might be because their specialized lifestyle constrains which mutations are viable. Most genetic changes would be detrimental to a bird so thoroughly adapted to underwater life. The genetics of flightlessness continues to be an active research area. Scientists are now using CRISPR and other gene editing technologies to test which specific genes are necessary for flight, experimentally knocking out candidates in laboratory birds to see what effects they have. This work is controversial, but could definitively answer questions about the genetic basis of complex traits. What we've learned so far is that there's no single flight gene, or even a small set of genes responsible for the ability to fly. Flight is a complex trait built by dozens or hundreds of genes working in concert. Losing it involves disrupting the coordination of these genes during development. And this can happen in many different ways. The same endpoint, a flightless bird, can be reached by multiple genetic routes. But certain routes are more accessible than others, which is why we see convergence. Different lineages finding the same genetic solutions, because those solutions are, in some sense, the easiest paths available. The evolutionary story of flightless birds cannot be separated from the extinction story. Of the more than 1,000 independent evolutions of flightlessness in birds, the majority have ended in extinction, and the vast majority of those extinctions have occurred in the last few thousand years, accelerating dramatically in the last few centuries. The pattern is clear and tragic. Flightless birds thrived for millions of years in isolation. Then humans arrived, bringing with them predators, competitors, and habitat destruction. Within decades or centuries, the flightless birds disappeared. Consider the Hawaiian Islands, one of the most isolated archipelagos on Earth, located over 3,000 kilometers from the nearest continent. Over millions of years, birds colonized these islands and radiated into numerous species. Many became flightless, including several species of flightless geese, rails, and ibises. When Polynesians arrived roughly 1,500 years ago, they brought rats and dogs. They also hunted birds for food and cleared forests for agriculture. 40 or more bird species went extinct following Polynesian colonization, most of them flightless. When Europeans arrived in the late 18th century, more extinctions followed. Introduced cats, mongooses, and more rats continued the destruction. Today, Hawaii has lost more bird species to extinction than anywhere else in the United States, and many of the survivors are critically endangered. Not a single species of flightless bird from Hawaii survives today, though their bones remain in caves and archaeological sites, testament to what once was. The Caribbean tells a similar story. Numerous islands supported flightless rails, ibises, and other birds. Most are now extinct, victims of human hunting and introduced predators. The Jamaican ibis, the Cuban flightless crane, the Puerto Rican cave rail, all gone, known only from sub-fossil bones. Madagascar lost its elephant birds, the largest birds that ever lived. The exact timing and causes of their extinction remain debated, but human activity, hunting, habitat destruction, introduced diseases, certainly played a role. Some species may have survived until a few hundred years ago, but none remain today. The pattern repeats across the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, the Caribbean, anywhere humans colonized islands that previously lacked human populations. Flightless birds, along with many other endemic island species, faced catastrophic declines. Why are flightless birds so vulnerable? Several factors contribute. First, they cannot escape by flying. When a predator approaches, a flying bird can take to the air and flee. A flightless bird must run, hide, or stand and fight. Against mammalian predators that hunt by scent and track prey on the ground, running and hiding are often ineffective. Fighting rarely works well either. A kakapo or a dodo is no match for a cat or a dog. Second, eland birds often lack appropriate anti-predator behaviors. Having evolved without mammalian predators, many island birds show little fear of approaching mammals. The dodo's tameness, often mocked as stupidity, was actually a sensible strategy in the context of Mauritius before humans arrived. There was no advantage to fleeing from everything that moved. But when sailors and their animals arrived, this tameness became fatal. The birds didn't recognize the threat until it was too late. Third, flightless birds often have slow reproductive rates. Many produce only 1 or 2 offspring per year. They invest heavily in each offspring, raising them for extended periods. This strategy works in stable, predator-free environments where most offspring survive to adulthood. But when adult mortality suddenly increases due to predation, populations cannot replace losses quickly. A few bad breeding seasons can drive populations to unsustainable levels. Fourth, many flightless species exist in small populations on small islands. Small populations are vulnerable to stochastic events: a bad storm, a disease outbreak, a temporary food shortage. They also suffer from inbreeding, which can reduce genetic diversity and fitness. When predators or other threats arrive, small populations have little buffer to absorb losses. Fifth, habitat destruction often accompanies the arrival of humans and their animals. Forests are cleared for agriculture. Wetlands are drained. Native plants are replaced with crops. This eliminates the resources flightless birds depend on and the refuges where they might hide from predators. Even if some birds survive initial contact, the cumulative effects of habitat loss can drive them to extinction over time. The combination of these factors makes flightless birds among the most extinction-prone animals on Earth. Studies have shown that flightless birds are 40 times more likely to go extinct than related flying species. Island birds in general are more vulnerable than continental species, and flightless island birds are the most vulnerable of all. Yet not all flightless birds have gone extinct. The ratites, ostriches, emus, cassowaries, rheas, kiwis survive, though several species are threatened. Penguins survive in relatively good numbers, though climate change and overfishing threaten some populations. A few island endemics survive through intensive conservation efforts. What makes the difference? Several factors promote survival. Large range size helps. Ostriches and emus range over vast areas of Africa and Australia. Even if populations in some regions decline, others can persist. Penguins live across thousands of kilometers of coastline in the southern hemisphere. Local extinctions don't threaten the entire species. Large body size can help, paradoxically. Very large flightless birds, like ostriches and cassowaries, are more difficult for introduced predators to kill than smaller species. An ostrich can kill a predator with its powerful kick. A cassowary is dangerous enough that even humans approach it cautiously. While habitat loss still threatens these species, they're less vulnerable to predation than smaller flightless birds. Effective conservation interventions make a crucial difference. The kakapo, which numbered only 51 individuals in the mid-1990s, has recovered to over 250 through intensive management. Every surviving bird lives on a predator-free island or in a predator-proof sanctuary. Their breeding is actively managed, with supplemental feeding, nest monitoring, and even artificial insemination to maximize genetic diversity. This level of intervention is expensive and labor-intensive, but it works. Habitat protection and predator control can allow flightless birds to persist even in human-modified landscapes. In New Zealand, predator-proof fencing creates mainland sanctuaries where kakapos, takahe, and other threatened species can live without constant danger from introduced mammals. Some offshore islands have been cleared of all introduced predators, creating refuges where native birds can thrive. But these efforts require long-term commitment and substantial resources. Not every species can receive such intensive care. Priorities must be set, trade-offs made, and even the best conservation efforts can fail if climate change, disease, or other unforeseen threats emerge. The future of flightless birds depends on what we choose to do. We created the extinction crisis by introducing predators and destroying habitats. We can mitigate it by removing predators, protecting habitats, and managing threatened populations. But the window for action is closing for many species. Once a population falls below a certain threshold, extinction becomes almost inevitable regardless of our efforts. What do flightless birds teach us about evolution, ecology, and conservation? What insights can we draw from their stories? First, they teach us about evolutionary trade-offs. Flight is extraordinarily useful, but it's not free. It requires maintaining lightweight skeletons, powerful muscles, complex plumage, high metabolic rates. In environments where flight provides little benefit, where predators are absent and food is accessible without flying, the costs of flight outweigh the benefits. Birds in these environments evolve in predictable directions, reallocating resources from flight to other functions. This reminds us that evolution is not about progress towards some ideal form. It's about adaptation to local conditions, even if that means losing capabilities that seem fundamental. Second, they teach us about convergent evolution. The independent evolution of flightlessness in ostriches, penguins, kakapos, dodos, and hundreds of other lineages shows that evolution is not purely random. When faced with similar selective pressures, organisms often evolve similar solutions. This happens because there are limited ways to solve certain problems. If you're a bird that needs to dive deep, you evolve denser bones and smaller wings. If you're a bird on a predator-free island with ground-level food, you evolve reduced flight capability and stronger legs. The details vary, but the patterns repeat. Third, they teach us about the power of isolation. Islands are natural laboratories where evolutionary processes run faster and produce more dramatic results than on continents. Small, isolated populations experience strong genetic drift and selection. Without gene flow from mainland populations, they can diverge rapidly, evolving unique forms. Many of our most valuable insights into evolution have come from studying island organisms, from Darwin's finches to Hawaiian honeycreepers to the flightless birds we've discussed tonight. Fourth, they teach us about the fragility of specialized adaptations. Traits that are advantageous in one context can become catastrophic liabilities when the context changes. The kakapo's freeze response worked perfectly against aerial predators, but made it defenseless against ground predators. The dodo's tameness served it well until humans arrived. Flightlessness was advantageous on predator-free islands, but disastrous when predators were introduced. This reminds us that organisms are not generally adapted to all possible environments. They're adapted to their specific environment. Change that environment drastically, and adaptations can become maladaptations. Fifth, they teach us about human impact. Wherever humans have gone, we've transformed ecosystems. We've introduced species, destroyed habitats, hunted wildlife, and altered climates. Island ecosystems, with their endemic species and simplified food webs, are particularly vulnerable. The extinction of flightless birds is largely a story of human-caused environmental change. But it's also a story of what happens when specialized organisms face rapid, drastic changes they have no evolutionary preparation for. Sixth, they teach us that conservation can work. The recovery of the kakapo, the protection of remaining takahi populations, the establishment of predator-free islands. These show that even species on the brink of extinction can be saved if we commit sufficient resources and effort. It's not easy, and it's not always successful, but it's possible. Every kakapo alive today exists because people decided extinction was not acceptable and worked tirelessly to prevent it. Finally, flightless birds teach us about the complexity and beauty of evolution. These birds have evolved hundreds of times, in hundreds of different lineages, in hundreds of different places. Each evolution is unique in its details, but similar in its broad patterns. Each flightless species carries within it a story of adaptation, of populations responding to their environments, of the deep logic that shapes life on Earth. By studying these birds, by understanding how and why they evolved, we gain insight into the processes that have generated all of life's diversity. As we close our exploration tonight, consider this. Flightless birds are not failures. They are not evolutionary dead ends or mistakes. They are success stories, lineages that found ways to thrive in specific environments by abandoning what we think of as a defining characteristic of birds. They remind us that nature is more creative, more flexible, more surprising than our categories and expectations allow. The night deepens. The stories of flightless birds stretch back tens of millions of years, across continents and oceans, through the rise and fall of species, through extinctions and survivals. From the emperor penguin diving into Antarctic darkness to the kakapo booming in New Zealand forests, from the ostrich sprinting across African plains to the extinct moa that once browsed New Zealand's ancient woodlands. These birds represent one of evolution's most repeated experiments. They lost flight, but they gained so much else. They show us that evolution is not about accumulating ever more complex traits, but about solving problems, about adapting to environments, about trading one capability for another when the trade makes sense. They show us that islands create opportunities for transformation, for radical experiments in form and function. And they show us, starkly, what happens when the conditions that shaped a species change faster than the species can adapt. Many flightless birds are gone now, lost to history, known only from bones and old accounts. Others survive, but barely, clinging to existence on tiny islands or in managed populations. A few thrive still, masters of their domains, proving that flightlessness, in the right context, is not a weakness, but a strength. As you drift towards sleep tonight, perhaps you'll carry with you images of these remarkable birds. The penguin, arrowing through water like a black and white missile. The ostrich, legs blurring as it races across savanna. The kakapo, climbing laboriously up a tree before spreading its useless wings and gliding down, a feathered parachute in the moonlight. Each of these birds chose a different path. Chose is the wrong word, of course. They were shaped by selection, by their environments, by the accumulated weight of generations. But the result is the same. Birds that cannot fly, yet are no less birds for all that. They are proof that even the sky is not essential when the land or the sea offers everything you need. If you found wonder in these stories, if these quiet explorations of evolution helped you unwind and sparked your curiosity, consider liking this video and subscribing to Bedtime Biology. Share your thoughts in the comments. Which flightless bird surprised you most? What other topics in biology would you like to explore as you drift off to sleep? Until next time, sleep well. And remember, sometimes the most extraordinary adaptations involve not what organisms gain, but what they have the courage to let go. Good night.